The July morning in the small suburban town was thick with humidity, the air heavy with the promise of a scorcher. It seemed as though the sun, already high in the sky, was casting a golden haze over everything, blurring the boundaries of the ordinary, turning the simple scenes of daily life into something otherworldly, something almost surreal. Kamari stood on the porch, her arms wrapped around her youngest daughter, Amanda, who was squeezing her so tightly that it almost seemed as if the little girl wanted to melt into her mother. Kamari could feel her daughter's tiny heartbeat against her own chest, a constant reminder of the love and the life they shared together. It was a love that had been nurtured over the years, through late-night feedings, school runs, homework sessions, and countless shared moments of joy and frustration. "Mom, please come with us," Amanda cried, her voice a sweet, plaintive sound, full of emotion beyond her 6 years. She buried her face into Kamari's neck, her little arms wrapping tighter and tighter. "Grandma's house is boring without you." Kamari smiled softly, running her hand through her daughter's thick, curly hair, which always smelled faintly of coconut oil and sunshine. It was a scent Kamari would always associate with warmth, with childhood, with the innocence of a girl who had yet to experience the cruelest twists of life. "I know, baby. I know," Kamari said gently, kissing the top of Amanda's head. She paused, trying to find the words to soothe the little girl, to make this separation a little less difficult. "But you're only going for a week, remember? When you get back, the house will be spotless, and I'll have a fresh sweet potato pie waiting for you. It'll be just like old times." Amanda sniffed, pulling back just enough to look at her mother with wide eyes that seemed to carry all the wisdom of the world despite her tender age. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, still clutching Kamari like a lifeline. Kamari kissed her forehead once more, but before she could say anything else, she heard a car door slam shut. It was Lean, her husband. He was standing in the driveway, his hands full of suitcases, his broad shoulders tense with the usual quiet energy that surrounded him. Lean had always been the stoic, dependable type. His body was solid, muscular, a result of years spent working in construction, first as a foreman and now as a senior project director. Over the years, Kamari had grown used to the way he carried himself, always reserved, always just a little bit distant, as though his mind was never fully present in the moment. But it was something she had never questioned. Lean was her rock, her partner, and, despite the small cracks in their relationship over the years, she had always believed that their bond was unbreakable. Now, as Kamari looked at him, there was something different in his expression. Something subtle, perhaps a flicker of impatience in his eyes as he turned to give her a quick, almost dismissive glance before he began loading the last of their bags into the trunk. "Are you sure you won't come?" Lean asked, his voice soft but firm as he walked toward her and Amanda. "My mother would love to have you." Kamari shook her head, offering him a small smile, trying to deflect the discomfort she felt creeping into her heart. She knew the invitation was sincere, but she also knew it wasn't something she wanted to accept. Kamari's relationship with Lean's mother, Miss Eloise, had always been strained. There was a distance between them that Kamari couldn't quite bridge. It was a quiet kind of tension, one that Miss Eloise rarely acknowledged but Kamari always felt, the kind of tension that lay just beneath the surface of their interactions, lurking in every conversation, every glance. "No, I'm fine here," Kamari said, her voice sounding more certain than she felt. "I've got so much to do. The house needs a good cleaning, and I've been putting it off for weeks. You and the kids go on ahead. I'll catch up with you later." She hesitated for a moment, watching Lean's reaction. His jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't argue. And that's what worried Kamari. She couldn't put her finger on it, but something felt off. Maybe it was the way he had barely looked at her when he came out of the car. Maybe it was the way he hadn't even kissed her goodbye, just a quick nod, and then back to the task at hand. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his behavior than simple exhaustion from the trip. "All right," he said after a beat, looking away as he adjusted the suitcase in his hand. "We'll be back in a week. Take care of yourself." He leaned down to kiss Amanda on the cheek, but as he did, Kamari caught the fleeting glimpse of a look in his eyes, a mix of resignation and perhaps a hint of something else she couldn't name. Amanda clung to her mother one last time, giving her a kiss before reluctantly letting go. Kamari stood there as Lean pulled out of the driveway, the car disappearing into the shimmering haze of the heat. She watched it for a moment, her heart heavy with something she couldn't quite place. And then, with a sigh, she turned back into the house. The silence that hit her as she closed the door behind her felt strangely oppressive. It wasn't the silence of peace, of solitude. It was the silence of something hidden, something left unsaid. Kamari moved slowly through the house, feeling like an outsider in her own life. She went to the kitchen and started a pot of coffee, sitting down at the table with her thoughts. It was in moments like these, when the world around her seemed to stop, that Kamari found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. The house wasn't huge, but it was cozy. It had 4 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, and a small sunroom where they'd spent countless mornings eating breakfast together. They'd bought it 8 years ago, when Amanda was just a baby and Wayne was still learning to walk. It had been a gift, a symbol of their success, of how far they had come as a family. And yet, as Kamari sat at the table, sipping her coffee, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Lean had always been so dependable, so grounded, but over the years, she'd noticed a quiet shift in him, a withdrawal that she had chalked up to his demanding job. There were always sites to visit, contracts to sign, and problems to fix. She had told herself that it was just the nature of his work, that his distance was just another part of their busy life. But today there was a different kind of silence. A silence that had nothing to do with the absence of noise, but everything to do with the presence of things left unsaid. Kamari set the cup down with a quiet thud and made a mental checklist. She had no time to sit in the silence of her own mind. The house was calling her. The clutter, the dust, the windows that needed to be cleaned, the storage nooks that had been neglected for far too long. Kamari stood up, her body moving automatically as she grabbed the stepladder and made her way toward the hallway. The storage nooks were tucked high up under the ceiling. She'd never taken the time to clear them out, always finding some excuse to put it off. But now, with Lean gone and the house empty, it seemed like the perfect time. She pulled on an old headwrap, slipped on a pair of rubber gloves, and climbed the ladder. As she opened the small doors to the storage nooks, a cloud of dust fell around her like a fine mist. It made her cough, and she waved the air around her face, wiping her hands on her jeans. The small, hidden compartments were filled with everything: old Christmas ornaments, broken gadgets, boxes of shoes that should have been thrown out years ago. And buried deep in the back of one nook, behind old moving blankets and a suitcase with a broken handle, Kamari found the unexpected: a cardboard box sealed with heavy tape, the contents of which had clearly been forgotten for years. She took it down carefully, balancing it on her lap as she sat on a stool. It wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light either. Something inside shifted with a quiet thud. Kamari ran her fingers along the tape, slowly peeling it back, her heart racing in anticipation, though she couldn't say why. When she opened it, the first thing she saw was a stack of photographs. Lean, young and smiling, standing with a woman Kamari didn't recognize. She picked up the first photo and felt her breath catch in her chest. This was not the man she had known. Kamari couldn't stop flipping through the photos. There was Lean at the beach, Lean at formal dinners, Lean kissing the cheek of this woman. The woman was beautiful, dark-skinned, with large eyes and a beauty mark above her lip. And then, as her hands shook, Kamari turned to the next photo. A little boy, no more than 3 months old, with a handwritten label on the back. Tarek, 3 months old. Kamari felt a chill spread through her, the blood draining from her face. She knew, in that moment, that everything she thought she knew about her life with Lean was a lie. The story has now unfolded to reveal the first, shocking discovery. Kamari's once perfect world begins to unravel as she finds the photographs and letters that challenge everything she thought she knew about her husband. The tension is set, and the questions grow. What has Lean been hiding all these years, and how deep does the deception run? Kamari's fingers trembled as she sat on the stool, surrounded by the dust and remnants of forgotten memories. The photographs, so innocently placed within the box, now felt like heavy stones in her hands, each one sinking deeper into her chest. She had always thought her life with Lean had been built on trust, love, and shared dreams, but now, those very things felt like fragile illusions, ready to crumble with each passing second. The first photo in her hands showed a young Lean, perhaps in his early 20s, smiling widely as he embraced the woman Kumari had never seen before. Her dark eyes sparkled with genuine joy, her head tilted back in laughter. She was beautiful, radiant even, and there was a small beauty mark above her lip, an imperfection that only made her seem more real, more human. Lean's arm was wrapped tightly around her waist, and in the warmth of that embrace, Kumari felt the unmistakable sting of betrayal. It wasn't just that Lean had been with someone before her, it was that he had never once spoken of this woman, never mentioned her, not even in passing. And now, she found herself confronted by this woman's image, a glaring presence from a past Kumari had never been allowed to see. Kumari flipped through the pages of the album, her breath growing shallow with each new discovery. In one photograph, the woman was holding a newborn baby. Lean stood beside her, smiling proudly as he held a bouquet of lilies in his hands. Kumari's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment that would shatter everything. The baby was in his arms, small and fragile, its soft face scrunched in sleep. The photo was carefully taken, framed with love. Kumari stared at it, her eyes drawn to the woman's face, which was a stark contrast to the calm expressions of the family she had created with Lean. This woman was alive in the past, alive in a way. Kumari felt a knot tighten in her throat as she turned the page. There it was, a simple black and white image of a little boy, no more than 3 months old. The back of the photo was inscribed with the name, Tariq, 3 months old. Her stomach lurched. A son. Lean's son. Kumari's mind raced, the implications of this one word sending shockwaves through her. Tariq. She repeated the name to herself, as if saying it aloud might somehow make it real. The child was Lean's. Her husband had a son who was almost the same age as their own son, Wayne. And yet, this boy had never been a part of their lives. Kumari's hands shook, the cold sweat of panic seeping into her skin. She reached for the next photograph, each one revealing more of the hidden life Lean had kept from her. There was Lean, standing at a formal dinner, holding the hand of the same woman, both dressed in elegant attire, laughing, living a life Kumari had never known existed. She kept flipping through the photos, finding more and more images of Lean and this woman in various settings, at beaches, at family gatherings, on vacations. Each photo seemed to burn with the weight of years, each one a silent accusation. Kumari's mind screamed, "Why didn't you tell me, Lean? Why didn't you tell me about this?" The photographs continued, more innocuous moments, a Christmas party, a trip to the mountains, but each image was tainted with the knowledge that they were all from a time before Kumari had entered the picture. And then, there it was, the document that Kumari had never expected to see. It was tucked underneath the photos, almost hidden in the corner of the box. A marriage certificate. Kumari's hands fumbled as she pulled it out and looked at the names, Lean Kellen Gable and Foma Diane Vance. The date on the certificate made her heart stop, 15 years ago, long before Kumari and Lean had met. Foma. That was the woman's name. Kumari's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes darted to the next piece of paper, a birth certificate for Tariq Kellen Gable. He was born just 2 years after their wedding. The truth hit Kumari like a physical blow. Lean had been married. He had a child. He had kept this secret for all these years. Kumari stared at the document, as if the paper itself was mocking her for ever believing in the man she called her husband. She wanted to scream, to throw the papers across the room. But instead, she sat there, silent, as the weight of the discovery slowly began to sink in. Lean hadn't been single when they met. He hadn't been the honest man she had believed him to be. He had hidden an entire life from her, a life that had included a wife, a child, and a marriage that had ended in divorce. Kumari tried to push away the overwhelming anger, but it clung to her, gnawing at her insides. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a stack of letters from the box. The handwriting was neat, elegant even. She began to read, each word more painful than the last. It was a letter from Foma, Lean's ex-wife, written years ago. The first line sent a jolt through Kamari. "Lean, I can't live like this anymore." The words were raw, laced with the kind of hurt that only comes from betrayal. Kamari read on, her heart aching as Foma described the loneliness, the neglect, and the growing sense of abandonment she had felt in her marriage. "I know about that woman," Foma had written. "Your mother told me." "Yes, Miss Eloise. She thinks I should know the truth. She said you're planning to leave me. Is it true?" Kamari's chest tightened. Foma had known. She had known about Kamari. Had Miss Eloise known too? Kamari's mind raced, trying to piece together the timeline of lies, the years of secrets that Lean had buried so deeply. And then, the final blow. "I won't write to you anymore. You've made your choice. But know this, Tarek will never forgive you. And I won't either. You killed our family. You killed me. I hope your new wife never finds out what you're capable of." Kamari's heart pounded in her chest. The anger, the confusion, the betrayal all mixed together in a furious storm of emotions. "Tarek will never forgive you." Those words echoed in her mind. Kamari had never even known of his existence until now. She had been the second woman all along. And now, she was faced with the painful reality that Lean's lies went far beyond what she had ever imagined. The silence in the room felt deafening as Kamari sat there, clutching the letters and photographs in her hands, struggling to comprehend what she had just uncovered. Lean had lied to her for over a decade. He had built an entire life with her while hiding his past, while keeping a child, a son, from her, from their family. Kamari couldn't breathe. The weight of the truth was suffocating, and yet it was undeniable. She needed answers. She needed to know everything. Kamari stood up shakily, her legs weak beneath her. She could barely hold the photographs as she placed them back into the box. But she wasn't done yet. She needed more. She needed to understand why Lean had kept this secret for so long. She grabbed her phone, hands shaking, and began typing in the name Foma Diane Vance. Her fingers flew across the screen as she searched for answers. But there was nothing useful, nothing that could shed light on this woman's life, on her story. Kamari tried adding the name Tarek Gable, hoping for a lead, and this time, she found something. The first result was a social media profile. It was blurry, but there was no denying it. The face was unmistakable. It was Tarek, grown up, 20 years old. Kamari's breath caught in her throat. This was Lean's son, her stepson, and he had no idea who she was. Kamari stared at the profile for what felt like hours, but there was no connection to be made. The boy, no, the man, was living his own life, far removed from the family Kamari thought she knew. Kamari quickly closed the app, trying to regain some semblance of control. But it was no use. Her entire world had just shifted, and she didn't know how to make sense of it all. Lean had hidden his past, and now, everything she thought she knew about their family was being questioned. How long had this been going on? How many more secrets were there, lurking in the shadows of their life? Kamari couldn't keep sitting in the silence of this house any longer. She had to face him. She had to confront Lean and demand the truth. But before she could do that, she had to gather the courage to ask herself the most important question of all. Could she ever trust him again? In this second part, Kamari's world unravels as she discovers the full extent of Lean's deception, his past marriage, his son, and the painful letters revealing the lies. The truth hits her hard, but she's determined to find answers. The emotional turmoil is deep, and Kamari faces the difficult task of confronting her husband, not knowing where it will lead. The days that followed Kamari's discovery felt like a blur, the world around her moving in slow motion while she stood frozen in the wake of Lean's lies. She tried to keep up with the daily tasks. She cleaned the house, did the laundry, cooked dinner. But each action felt like a chore, a distraction from the truth that had shattered her sense of reality. The photographs and letters she had uncovered were still fresh in her mind, each one a reminder of the man she thought she knew, the the man who had lied to her for over a decade. Kamari couldn't sleep. Every night, she tossed and turned, haunted by the images of Lean with Foma, with Tarek, with a past she had never been allowed to see. She couldn't help but wonder how many other secrets Lean had kept from her. How long had he been lying? And more importantly, why? Her anger simmered beneath the surface, but it was a quiet, controlled rage. She wasn't ready to confront him yet. The weight of the discovery was still too raw, too painful. She needed to gather her thoughts, to plan her next move. But with each passing day, the need to confront Lean grew stronger. She couldn't let him continue living in the lie he had built around their family. She deserved the truth. Finally, the day arrived. The day she had been dreading, yet knew she couldn't avoid any longer. Kamari received a text from Lean. It was casual, almost too casual. "We made it safe. Kids are in the pool. Mom says, hi. Call me when you're done cleaning." Kamari's fingers hovered over her phone as she read the message again. "Mom says hi." It was a message that felt hollow, as if Lean were trying to pretend that everything was normal. But Kamari knew better. She had just uncovered the truth about him, and now she had to face him. There was no more pretending, no more ignoring the lies. She stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. The house felt suffocating now, the silence overwhelming. She grabbed the folder with the photos, the letters, the documents, everything she had discovered about Lean's past, and carried it into the living room. The weight of the folder felt heavier than it should have, as though it contained not just the truth, but the end of everything she had believed in. Kamari waited in silence, her mind racing with the conversation that was about to unfold. What would she say? How would she confront him without completely losing control? Would he deny it? Would he try to lie his way out of it, as he had done for so many years? The sound of the front door opening made her jump. She quickly set the folder down on the table, her hands trembling. The kids rushed in first, their excited voices filling the house as they returned from their trip to Lean's mother's house. Amanda immediately ran into her arms, giggling as she handed Kamari a seashell she had picked up at the beach. Kamari smiled through the wave of emotion that hit her. "Everything will be okay," she told herself, even as the storm inside her raged on. "Mommy, when are you coming with us?" Amanda asked, her face bright with excitement. Kamari held her close, savoring the moment, but her mind was already somewhere else. The next few minutes were going to change everything. Wayne followed, looking a little more reserved than his sister, but still eager to see his mother. He hugged her quickly and stepped back, giving Kamari a knowing look. At 11 years old, Wayne was already showing signs of maturity beyond his years. He could sense when something wasn't right, even if he didn't fully understand it. Kamari kissed him on the cheek, trying to reassure him, but she knew things were about to change for all of them. Then, Lean entered. He was tanned from the sun, his face relaxed, as if nothing had happened, as if everything were still as it had always been. His carefree smile did nothing to calm Kamari's nerves. She had spent days processing the truth, and now it was time to confront him. She had to do this. She had to say the words that had been building inside her for so long. "Hey, sunshine," Lean said, walking toward her. His voice was warm, casual. He leaned in to kiss Kamari, but she pulled away, her body rigid with tension. The smile on his face faltered for a split second, but it quickly returned. "Everything okay at home?" he asked, his voice sounding almost too nonchalant. Kamari's heart raced as she stood up, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. This is it, she thought. No more lies. "I need to talk to you," Kamari said, her voice steady but filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "The kids need to unpack. You and I need to talk." Lean hesitated, his brows furrowing. He glanced toward Amanda and Wayne, who were already halfway up the stairs, oblivious to the storm brewing in the living room. Kamari closed the door behind them, her gaze never leaving Lean's face. For the first time in years, she didn't look at him with affection. She looked at him with cold, hard clarity. "What's going on, Kamari?" Lean asked, his voice quiet, but there was an edge to it now. He had sensed the shift in her. He was no fool. Kamari walked over to the table and picked up the folder, placing it in front of him with a deliberate motion. Lean looked at it with confusion, then slowly reached for it, flipping it open. As he saw the photographs, the letters, the marriage certificate, his face changed. His eyes darted from the images to Kamari, back to the papers, and then back to Kamari. His confusion turned to fear, and Kamari could see the shift in his expression. This wasn't the man who had lied to her for so many years. This was the man who had been caught, cornered. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly, but Kamari wasn't fooled. "It doesn't matter where," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "What matters is that it's the truth." Lean slammed the folder onto the table, his fists clenched at his sides. "This is nonsense. Someone's trying to drive a wedge between us," he spat, his voice rising. "You're trying to ruin everything we've built." Kamari stood her ground, her body trembling but her voice unwavering. "No, Lean. You ruined it. You lied to me. For 12 years, you lied to me. You kept a son, a whole other life from me. You pretended to be someone you're not. You didn't just lie about your past. You lied about who you are, about who we are. You made me believe in a lie." "I didn't mean to hurt you," Lean said weakly, his voice faltering. He took a step toward her, but Kamari took a step back, refusing to let him near her. "You didn't mean to hurt me?" Kamari's voice cracked as the words escaped her. "You lied to me, Lean. You hid an entire family. You didn't just hurt me. You hurt our kids. You betrayed us all." Tears welled in Kamari's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had to stay strong now. This was the moment. This was her truth, and she would not allow it to be twisted by his excuses. "You were planning to leave us. You were planning to walk out on me, on Amanda, on Wayne, just like you did to Foma. You were going to run off with someone else and start over." Lean's face paled. Kamari could see him breaking down, his defenses crumbling in the face of the truth. But it was too late for apologies. Too late for regrets. Kamari's heart had broken, and there was no way to fix it now. "I'm done," Kamari said firmly, her voice strong. "You're out of our lives. You will pay child support. Real child support. Not the scraps you've been giving to Foma." Lean stood there for a long moment, his face twisted in anguish. "Kamari, please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Please don't do this." But Kamari had already made up her mind. "It's over. You're out." In this part, Kamari confronts Lean with everything she's discovered, his lies, his past, and the secrets he's kept hidden. The truth finally comes out, and Lean is faced with the consequences of his actions. Kamari's strength grows as she takes control of her life, demanding accountability for the betrayal she's endured. The silence in the room felt suffocating after Kamari's words. Lean stood there, broken, his eyes wide, his hands trembling slightly. Kamari could see the weight of the truth crashing down on him, but it didn't matter anymore. She had made her decision. For the first time in years, she was not the one who was broken. She was the one standing tall, the one who would not let herself be deceived any longer. Lean opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He reached for the folder again, his hands shaking as he picked up the documents. His face twisted in frustration, confusion, and perhaps a touch of guilt. Kamari watched him with cold, unwavering eyes. She had spent 12 years building a life with this man, and now, the foundation had been shattered. Every memory, every moment they had shared, seemed tainted by the lies that had been buried so deeply. "You can't fix this, Lean," Kamari said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "You've lost your family. You've lost me. And you've lost the kids. They won't ever see you the same way again. You can't erase what you've done." She turned her back on him, her gaze focused on the door. Kamari could feel her chest tightening, the weight of the decision pressing down on her, but it was a weight she could bear. She had no other choice. She couldn't keep living in a lie. And as much as it hurt, she knew that letting go was the only way forward. Lean didn't move. For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing but the sound of Kamari's breathing, slow and measured, as she tried to calm her nerves. She had just confronted her husband of 12 years, exposed his secrets, and demanded the truth. The battle was over. But now, the real challenge lay ahead. Kamari had to rebuild her life, her children's lives, without Lean. A few moments passed before Lean finally spoke again. His voice was small, almost a whisper. Kamari, please. I can change. I will. I swear it. Just give me a chance. Kamari shook her head, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She had heard this before, promises, apologies, and empty vows to change. But Kamari wasn't the naive woman she once was. She had grown stronger, wiser, through the pain and betrayal. She had learned that love, when built on lies, wasn't love at all. I can't believe you anymore, she said quietly, her voice a mix of sadness and finality. You don't get to destroy everything and then ask for a second chance. Not after all the lies. Kamari turned around slowly, meeting Lean's gaze one last time. There was no anger in her eyes, just a deep sense of grief, a loss that couldn't be fixed, a wound that would take time to heal. You were never honest with me. And now I can't even look at you without seeing the lies. I have to move on for myself. And for the kids. She saw the brief flicker of emotion in Lean's eyes, a mix of regret, shame, and desperation, but it was too late. Kamari had already made up her mind. The door opened, and their children entered the room, Wayne and Amanda looking up at Kamari with wide, innocent eyes. They had heard the heated words, seen the tension between their parents, but they didn't understand it fully. They were too young to grasp the complexity of what was happening. Kamari knelt down, gathering Amanda into her arms first. Hey, baby, Kamari whispered, her voice breaking as she kissed her daughter's forehead. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay. Wayne stepped closer, watching his mother with a mixture of concern and confusion. He was old enough to sense the shift in the atmosphere, the heavy weight of the words spoken between his parents. Kamari took his hand, pulling him into the hug. We're going to be okay, Kamari repeated, her voice firm now, despite the tears that threatened to fall. We're going to be okay together. Lean watched silently, his face pale and his shoulders slumped. He didn't speak again, and Kamari didn't need him to. She had made her decision, and there was no going back. Lean had lost her, lost their family, lost everything that had once meant something to him. The house, the children, the life they had built together, they were no longer his. Kamari knew this was the hardest part, letting go. But as she stood there, holding her children close, a sense of clarity washed over her. The pain was still raw, still fresh, but there was also a sense of freedom. She had reclaimed her power. No longer would she live in the shadows of Lean's deceit. She would build a new life, a life where trust and honesty came first. Kamari turned to Lean one last time, her eyes cold and resolute. I don't want to see you here again. Take your things and leave. You can come for the kids if they want to see you, but that's it. Lean opened his mouth as if to argue, but Kamari raised her hand, silencing him. No, Lean. It's over. With a final, aching look, Lean turned and walked out of the house. Kamari stood there for a moment, watching him go, feeling the weight of the finality in his departure. When the door clicked shut behind him, it was as though a chapter had ended. The silence that followed was different this time. It was peaceful, almost serene, and Kamari finally allowed herself to take a deep breath. She was free. The lie was over. The weeks that followed were filled with legal meetings, custody arrangements, and moments of quiet reflection. Kamari fought for what she and her children deserved: financial stability, a home, and a future that was no longer clouded by Lean's betrayal. She found unexpected support from Ifma, Lean's first wife, and Zalani, the woman Lean had been seeing. Together, they helped Kamari navigate the legal battles and supported her as she fought for a future of truth and transparency. Kamari kept the house. The courts had ruled in her favor, considering Lean's hidden accounts and the records of his infidelity. He had tried to fight it, but there was no room for argument when the truth was laid out in black and white. Lean moved out of the house, living in a small rented apartment on the other side of town, alone and estranged from his children. His relationship with Salani and CA fell apart as well, leaving him with nothing but the consequences of his actions. As for Kamari, she began to heal. Slowly, piece by piece, she rebuilt her life. The wounds would take time to mend, but she had learned the most important lesson of all. She was stronger than she had ever realized. She didn't need Lean or anyone else to define her worth. She was enough. A year later, Kamari sat on the porch of the house she had fought so hard to keep. Amanda was playing in the yard with a ginger kitten, a gift from Ifma. Wayne was working on a school project, and Kamari found herself smiling at the quiet peace that surrounded her. The future felt uncertain, but it was hers to shape. And as she looked at her children, Kamari knew that they were going to be okay. Together, they would heal. Together, they would find their way. She had learned to trust herself, to embrace her own strength, and now, she would move forward with a heart open to new possibilities. Kamari picked up her phone and saw a message from Ifma. Tarek's getting married. The words made her smile. Tarek was moving on, building a life of his own. Kamari couldn't help but think that, despite everything, he would be a better father than Lean ever was. Kamari closed her eyes and took a deep breath, the weight of the past lifting with each passing moment. She had faced the darkness, and now she was ready to walk into the light. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. Kamari hugged her children close, feeling the warmth of their love. They would be okay. She was sure of it. Together, they would make a new life, one built on truth, love, and the strength to rise above the lies. In this final part, Kamari confronts Lean and takes control of her life, despite the overwhelming pain of betrayal. She begins to rebuild her world, finding strength in her children, her newfound support system, and her own resilience. Kamari's journey is one of empowerment, a reminder that even after the deepest betrayal, there is hope for a fresh start.